Donald Trump's a very busy guy, and Joe Trillo is here to explain it all to us.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Longtime ally of the show, not necessarily a guy we agree with all the time on the show, but friend of the show, State Representative Joe Trillo, now former honorary co-chairman of the Donald Trump campaign, is my guest tonight. And just remember this, throughout this entire broadcast, there's a concept here that I've practiced, in preparation for tonight's show, and that is, you can't take them literally. You can't take them literally. What your problem is that you listen for every word he says versus what he really means. Now, as much as I've been working on that, what's difficult about it is to try to figure out what he really means. So I'm going to need Joe a lot, and so are you. Welcome in. It is nice to have you on this Thursday evening. Interestingly enough, the entire rundown is all Trump. I mean, there's a lot of local stuff going on, no doubt, and there's local aspects to the president's latest moves that we'll cover over the course of the show. But, building the wall, sanctuary cities, the notion that his kingship, I thought I was going to cover that whole rundown there, Kev. I was. There we go. Building the wall, sanctuary cities, his king. Kevin and I practiced this before the show, too, and everything. His kingship, that's, by the way, my producer's editorial position right there. And because she's a troublemaker, too. And this notion of voter fraud, which I'm going to have to. All right. Anyway, I have fun with my friend Joe Trillo. And I'm trying to get him, I'm trying to tickle him over here, so I got the upper edge. Here's some of the headlines that characterize the latest. Trump blocks Syrian refugees. Okay, this rep is correct that the wall has been 700 miles built already based on acts in 2006, so it'll be interesting to see how that pertains to the next plan. And by the way, the Mexican president more or less said go to Donald Trump. And what's interesting about that is reportedly Donald Trump's going to have some complicated formula for repayment from Mexico without the cooperation of the Mexican president. So I'm not sure why they had to meet, but Joe Trillo will explain that to us as well. Here's the latest.
President Donald Trump boarded Air Force One for the first time as president to address Senate and House Republicans in Philadelphia at their annual retreat. Today, Mr. Trump is expected to order federal agencies to stop the flow of refugees into the United States until stricter screening measures are available. In President Trump's first interview on ABC News, he defended the process known as extreme vetting, his core campaign promise.
The world is a mess. The world is as angry as it gets. Well, you think this is going to cause a little more anger? The world is an angry place.
Early this morning, Mr. Trump called Chelsea Manning an ungrateful traitor for now calling President Obama a weak leader. It was an apparent response to a column published in The Guardian in which the former U.S. military intelligence analyst said Mr. Obama's biggest shortcoming was his tendency to compromise, creating the appearance of weakness. He also lobbed a Twitter attack on Mexico, threatening to cancel his upcoming meeting with Mexico President Enrique Peña Nieto. Mr. Trump tweeted, the U.S. has a $60 billion trade deficit with Mexico. It has been a one-sided deal from the beginning of NAFTA, with massive numbers of jobs and companies lost. If Mexico is unwilling to pay for the badly needed wall, then it would be better to cancel the upcoming meeting.
I thought, sorry for that little blip. I don't know who that guy was. I thought that we were going to be able to pay for the wall. Well, first they were going to pay for the wall. Now we're going to build them for the wall. Now they're not going to meet over the wall, and now there's no necessary meeting.
I got news for you.
What?
First of all, it's good to be here. But I got news for you. Mexico is already paying for the wall.
Oh, see,
the
I knew
payments have started because every business that Trump keeps in this country, guess who gets screwed? Mexico. So they already started to pay. This isn't going to be a willing write the check every month to the U.S. This is going to be, you're going to pay with tariffs and trade negotiations.
That whole tariff and trade negotiation thing has multi facets to it, a lot of ramifications. And sometimes tariff and trade actually hurt the entity that's tariffing and trading. I mean, that's part of the economic debate that's going to go on with Republicans, by the way, and the Trump administration on 35% tariffs for any company that moves out of a country and tries to, sell goods back. So this whole concept of whacking people on goods and services is in his wheelhouse, not necessarily going to be an economic benefit still has to be debated, still has to be analyzed, still has to be studied. Let's admit one thing. At the beginning, it was they're going to pay for the wall. And the insinuation...
I never thought for 1 minute
because it's all cash right.
they
because
were going
you
to write a
don't
check.
listen to
you
the
don't
words.
understand Trump speak.
Got
I'm
it,
here
see?
to interpret
Well, I told
for you.
everybody that.
I'm here to interpret
I know you
for
are. So explain to me what... are you going to tell me that there wasn't a transition from his early rhetoric to a month before the election?
There will always be. There will always be. Because
So
he
most
doesn't
people
let you know
assumed-
his whole plan on anything. On anything. Let's talk about
Which,
it.
by the way, gives you a lot of comfort, doesn't it?
No, because it does give me comfort.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, because if you're going to do things, you can't lay the plan out all politically and be attacked on the plan every single
Because
day.
the consummate negotiator would never do that.
Never.
Got it.
Never. So
You better hope like heck that the transactional negotiation mindset of Donald Trump applies to running a country. You better
I hope it does.
pray like heck, and we all better pray like heck, because I'm not so certain it does.
what he's shown me so far,
Deal-making and
in
running a country are
week
two different things.
Since he's been president, he's done more in this week than any president has ever done.
In a week.
In a week.
Right. I agree.
In a week. He started to do exactly what he promised he was going to do right through the election that he was voted to do. Now, is he going to alternate his plan a little bit? Is he going to shift things around a little bit? Of course he
All right,
is.
so explain this to me. Why is a meeting with the Mexican president necessary? And why do we have this diplomatic two-step going on between the two of them? When there was a meeting scheduled next week, and the Mexican president, based on the executive order yesterday and the Trumpian rhetoric, cancels the meeting, then Trump suggests he too doesn't think there should be a meeting if he's not going to pay for the wall. In other words, the rhetoric comes back, I'm not going to the meeting, and we're not paying for the wall. Why would he suggest if he's not paying for the wall, there's no such meeting, if in fact he's already paying for the wall under your theory?
Oh, he is already paying. He's going to pay for it big time. But let me say this: the Mexican president.
You follow my question?
Yes, the Mexican president did what he had to do in order to save face in his own country, because Donald Trump has been slamming Mexico and how they're going to pay for the wall, and he's been grabbing the jobs and telling the big companies that we're going to move over there. You're not moving over there anymore. So he's already hurting Mexico. Mexico's already paying for the wall. Why would he? Why would the Mexican president not want to negotiate with Donald Trump? I think he made a mistake in terms of. I think there's going to be a point in time.
Why would Donald Trump suggest it's important to have a meeting and/or to hear that he's willing to talk about paying for the wall when you say we're already paying for the wall? Why make that an issue?
Because there might be an easier way if he sits down with Donald Trump, other than do a bloodletting, which Trump will do. If you sit down with him and you negotiate with him, it may not be quite as painful.
I just find that to be a classic. I really do. The bloodletting is an economic bloodletting, and it will impact jobs in America, not undocumented jobs. I'm talking about real jobs.
You know what? I don't believe that's going to happen. I believe that we're still going to be able to have undocumented people come in under a worker program, so they will be able to come into this country. All Trump wants to do, when I try to understand where he's coming from, all he wants to do is put a barrier up. How he does it could be done electronically, it could be done with cement walls, it could be done, just put a barrier up on the border so you can control people coming across the border. Now you have a door, and that door people can come in. Okay? As long as they come in through that door, we know who they are, we take their names, and we decide, are you here for citizenship? Are you here to work in this country? And we control who comes into this country. That's all Trump wants to do.
Now, to your credit,
he is not going to export all the illegal immigrants either. So they can relax. They can relax.
Right.
He's after the criminals.
Right.
The criminals.
Which
Read
is what, by the
lines.
way, we've all been after the entire way. Even those in sanctuary cities so to speak, and we'll talk about that in a second. On the wall itself, you know, cost estimates run anywhere from $10 to $25 billion to do the wall. You know, against the national economy and, you know, the deficit we have, it's almost like, yeah, what the heck anyway. It's not the most enormous expense we've ever had. Hell, the Big Dig was almost as expensive.
He just gave away $139 billion to cities and towns all over the country to help rebuild their infrastructure. And because this stupid state wants to stab him in the eye every day, from the governor to the Congress people to the senators, they want to stab him in the eye. We're going to get nothing.
But my point was, that was a good one. But my point was, cost estimates could run a lot higher, and legal entanglements could actually bear some fruit here. It'll be interesting to see when the first litigation comes from American property owners who say, you know what, we don't want this.
I heard you say that yesterday on the radio. I've been to the border, Dan.
Glad you're listening.
There is a strip of land that the government controls. It's about 50 feet wide. We already have a road on it. It's a dirt road, most of it, but it's what the Border Patrol goes up and down all the time. And that road is U.S. control.
Based on the construction, the technology, there could be some problems. There are some spots, and it'll just be interesting to see if any of this stuff is held up by litigation. Never mind what pushback he might get in Congress. And it's uncertain, I think, at this point to determine whether the 2006 legislation that created, you know, more wall and the first 700 plus miles that we have actually suffices for green light to build this thing. I'm not certain about that. Are you?
Well, the wall that we ended up building, we went for a quarter mile with a steel wall, which has 6 by 6 beams in it, rectangular, spaced maybe 2 inches apart. The wall will go for a quarter mile, then it goes down to a barbed wire fence that's 3 feet high that you could walk over. Then it goes another quarter of a mile with this like 18-foot wall, and it goes down to another. So it's stupid the way they built it. I don't know what they were thinking, but I saw it and I have videos of it.
And there you are. Do I have to watch Trillo Talks to see it?
You should.
Why didn't you bring it?
Trillo Talks, 9 o'clock Sunday mornings.
There you go. And repeats like often.
It does.
Yes, it does. When we come back, the local aspect to this, huffing and puffing from law enforcement and mayors and all that stuff. Stay with us.
I call this press conference today because I'm disturbed and angered by the news out of Washington, D.C. Washington is advancing the most destructive and un-American threats made on America during the campaign. The latest executive orders and statements by the President about immigrants are a direct attack on Boston's people, Boston's strength, and Boston's values.
They're just playing to the fears of their constituency because those are the people who elect them. Who elects them? Who elects them is the minority community. They get 30% of their votes from the minority community, and they keep trying to build that community up. The more people you can put dependent on state government, on city government, the more you can build up your voting base so you can get reelected. That's all about being reelected.
So that's Marty Walsh from Boston, obviously, the mayor there. Headlines here reflecting the country, so to speak. Mayors not happy across the board. I guess they're all playing from that same playbook. And then we've got religious leaders who are ready to lay their bodies down. We'll talk to the Reverend coming up on the radio this week and television, no doubt. But here's what happened in Providence yesterday.
Mayor Jorge Elorza says the city will not be handing undocumented immigrants over to the feds.
We're not going to sacrifice any of our folks here in Providence.
His pledge comes after President Donald Trump signed an executive order that in part tells Homeland Security to identify so-called sanctuary cities that don't cooperate with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE.
We are going to restore the rule of law in the United States.
There's no set definition of what sanctuary city is. I have no problem with the term. Some people say we're not, some people say that we are. But what's important are the policies, and Providence has always been a sanctuary for immigrants, and it will continue to be that way. And in nowhere are we going to change our policies.
Elorza says Providence does cooperate with the feds, but does not go out of its way to ask the immigration status of people who have not committed a crime.
We will not be asking, we will not be acting as immigration officers.
Reverend Donald Anderson is taking matters into his own hands, seeking out churches, synagogues, and mosques willing to take in immigrants who fear being deported.
Should ICE decide to come into a house of worship, then there are those of us, people like myself and many others, who are willing to put our bodies in between ICE agents and those people, and if need be arrested.
And it's unknown at this time if any federal funding will be cut to Providence. The mayor says federal dollars make up 10% of the city's budget.
Now, threatening federal funds is no way to run a railroad.
No, but threatening not to adhere to the rule of law, that's no way to run a city
Are
or
you
a state.
suggesting the city of Providence is threatening not to adhere to the rule of law?
Absolutely, absolutely. All Donald Trump said in that clip was we're going to hold everybody to the rule of law. So
the city of Providence turns over to ICE every criminal that they learn.
Supposedly. How do you know that?
Well, okay. Well, let's just talk about policy. They suggest to you that they're doing that.
Yeah.
So you're going to tell me that Chief Clements and Commissioner Perry are lying to the general public?
They're standing aside of the mayor, so they're buying whatever he's selling right now. The same way the head of the state police stands next to the governor when the governor talks about breaking the law.
So are you telling me that you think law enforcement are standing shoulder to shoulder with their elected bosses, with their fingers and toes crossed, saying one thing, supporting one thing said, and doing another?
Let's go to the extreme, which I don't think Donald Trump is going to do. There is a law in this country that says if you're here illegally, you can be deported.
Right.
Okay, you agree to that? Well, if the mayor of the city of Providence is standing next to his public safety commissioner saying that we're not going to do that, you're basically enforcing
Donald
the fact
Trump,
that you're not.
You already boastfully suggested in the last segment that even Donald Trump's not asking for that to happen.
He's not.
The agreement, I think, seems to be clear. Criminals who happen to be illegals are going out.
But they're grandstanding on the other issue. They're grandstanding on we will not deport immigrants. Nobody's asking them to deport immigrants. But there is a law that says you can deport all illegal immigrants if you want to adhere to that law.
Repeating a law that Donald Trump will not execute, so he says, or ask for enforcement. Although he's looking for 5,000 more Border Patrol, although he's going to triple the ICE ranks. Here's the question. Where's the federal grant or the federal funding grant threat coming from? Based on not deporting everyone walking down the street or not cooperating with the legalities and the stepped up law enforcement of the prisons? Because I don't think Providence or Boston or anybody else is going to not comply with a stepped up enforcement effort in the criminal category.
I don't think they are, but I think that the grandstanding that the governor is doing and the mayor of the city of Providence is doing is poking the administration in the eye. And if you do something like that, there's ramifications. In politics, it's very simple. You reward your friends and you punish your enemies. That's politics 101.
Politics and governing are two different things.
Politics always plays a significant part in governing, and that's something that the average person can't accept.
So hypothetically, just taking a flyer, it's 2020, the middle of Governor Joe Trillo's term, just a hypothetical, and someone, what would you say, ticks you off in Burrillville. What are you going to do? Cut the funding? Because it's politics?
Exaggeration for effect. First of all...
Exactly the scenario you're discussing.
Does what? What? Give me an example. You're not giving me an example of what Burrillville does. What do they do?
They say, you know what? We're so against the Invenergy plant that we are going to do X.
I would expect that they would be against the energy plant because they have to play to their constituents. So in that case, I would let them off the hook.
Be relieved about 2020. When we come back, voter fraud. Huh? Next.
Comment that he made was, he said 3 to 5 million people, could have voted illegally based on the studies that he's seen.
Every time I try to figure out why Donald Trump can't shush about 3 to 5 million voters fraudulently voting, I think about Joe Trillo, who's explained to us repetitively that you got to pay less attention to his words and more to his meaning. On this one, though, I can't apply the formula. This is dangerous.
No, it's not dangerous at all. All the man is saying right now is that he's convinced, and there are a lot of people that are convinced, I'm convinced, voter fraud's been going on for years in this state. But with that said, he's convinced that all we need to do is do an investigation and let's see how bad it is. That's all he's saying to do.
The Bush administration did a 5-year investigation in the mid-2000s.
Yeah, that was
fraud.
How many years ago?
And they came up with 129 cases of voter fraud nationwide. 129.
Well, there are several reports out there, and I had it. I can't call it up now because you just told me we were going to go on this subject. But there are a lot of reports out there saying that there's been a lot of voter fraud. Let me tell you how voter fraud happens. It happens in this state. What happens is the Democrats round up illegal immigrants, they round up homeless people, they shuttle them to the Civic Center. As long as they have something on them that shows that they have an address and their name, they let them vote. And you can only do that in the presidential election. So they stacked the deck. The Democrats have stacked the deck across the country. It's a miracle that Donald Trump won because the Democrats across the country
And those that watch the
stacked
election
deck.
site have the chance to protest, challenge, and provisionalize those votes.
Nobody does that. After an election, it's all over. Everybody goes away. Who lost, lost. It's too complicated to do.
Well, I'm guessing then you'll take a debate with our Secretary of State, Nellie Gorbea,
All day long.
on whether or not this happens.
All day long.
And every other Secretary of State in the country who suggests that
Nellie,
while lists are old and names are not necessarily accurate, that the actual votes have never bbeen proved to be anything more than infinitesimally effective in this election.
if you think a Democratic Secretary of State is going to out what her party is doing, you're crazy. It's not going to happen.
Meaning their outward scheme
Their outward scheme
to fraudulently
that they
elect anybody.
Well, the only fraudulent part about it is you can be homeless and you can have a right to vote. But you cannot be a non-citizen and have a right to vote. But they don't want to check it, so they will say to you, "All we do what the law requires. The law requires that they show some form."
So let me see if it's clear. I'm clear. The Democrats in this state operate fraudulent elections.
To some extent, yes.
A healthy visit. Thanks for the translation.
Okay.
It's always good to see you. Make sure you watch Trillo Talks. I'll tell you what's up next. Safe to say that when Joe Trillo and I get together, it's an animated conversation, and I thoroughly enjoy it, and I hope you did too. However, I mean, there's a lot of substance there, and his suggestion that Democrats more or less are running, a fraudulent operation in our elections, you determine what you think about that. Coming up tomorrow night on this program, former Mayor Joe Paolino, who suggests that no good deed goes unpunished. His effort to buy the St. Joe's Hospital, vacant now, for a homeless solution ran into some serious opposition, and he'll have some of that opposition to deal with tomorrow night on Dan York's State of Mind. See you at 3 on the radio tomorrow on WPRO. I'm honored that you watched. Good night.